tell you a little bit about who I am, and then I'll try to challenge you about thinking about the future. I run 50 years. We invest in technology companies solving the world's biggest problems with technology. The fund is based in San Francisco. I also based Impact.tech. It's a community of around 1,000 people, mostly entrepreneurs, trying to combine purpose and profit. So I'm your typical millennial. I started my first company 11 years ago, back in Poland, out of college. It was a software development firm. And I became the CEO of one of the top-tier software development firms. I run big software developer events in Europe. And I started a Polish tech community. And together with my partners, we would build different products and spin them out as different companies. And that's how I went through Y Combinator, one of the world's best tech accelerators. And that's how I started a company that is right now a big enterprise software business called Base that's on a trajectory to do very well. So sometime after 8 years of working with the same group of amazing people, I started asking the questions of why am I doing what I'm doing? And I realized that even though I was successful, I didn't actually feel that my work was important. So I did the standard thing, went traveling, ended up in New York, danced some contemporary dance, and a big venture firm approached me to join them as their partner, focus on B2B SaaS, software investment. So I did that, and for a few months, it was going pretty well, but at some point I realized that we often giving advice to struggling founders, and as they're trying to scale their ad optimization company. And what I really wanted to tell them is, listen, you're too smart. You should be doing something way more meaningful. But that wasn't my mandate. So as a real entrepreneur, I decided to solve it. And at around the same time, I started talking with my Y Combinator friend and a fellow entrepreneur, Seth Bannon. And we were fascinated, and I know this is a group that likes Winston Churchill. We were fascinated by one of his essays, the 1931 essay called 50 Years Hence. And in that essay, somehow, God knows how, he predicts synthetic biology, microbes used as engines to make stuff. He predicted nuclear energy, wireless communication, and he even talked about lab-cultured meat. He specifically explained how it could work. In 1931, he had no idea of how that would work. And in the same essay, and I encourage you to read it, he also talks about the social responsibility of leaders and technologists to build the world we want. So I started looking into other areas where technology could solve some of the world's biggest problems, eliminate entire categories of problems. And that's how 50 years, the fund came to be. So we invest, let me go back. We invest in technology companies that can be massive businesses, and they are using technology to positively contribute to achieving one of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we also try to prove that you can have alpha returns doing that. Interestingly, we've been actually investing in some of the same companies Winston was talking about 86 years ago. So we have 3 biotechnology companies that are using different methods to create animal ingredients, such as meat, leather, and gelatin, so we can stop relying on the animal agriculture as we know it. We have invested in companies that are making chemicals sustainably and economically. And we have also invested in satellites companies that are building telecommunication satellites to give access to the internet to half of this world's population that doesn't currently have it. So for us, there's nothing more important and exciting to be working with those founders who are trying to build massive businesses by solving some of those world's biggest problems. And I see 50 years as at the intersection of those 2 trends. One that you're well aware of is the kind of moving away from the narrow definition of business, extractive definition of business popularized in the 70s by Milton Friedman. And the second trend is this huge wave of the 4th Industrial Revolution that's bringing changes of unimaginable scale. And it's impossible to think about the future and think about the impacts of the technology that the technology will have in the world without thinking about artificial intelligence that's going to empower so many industries. And I think about it a lot. And I think you should too. So just to summarize, I'm not sure where you are with your knowledge, but progress in artificial intelligence has been slow for many decades. But as you see on this slide, it has been really fast in the last few years. And this is narrow-eyed. These are applications, artificial systems are better at a specific task. But then there's the notion of general AI, human-level intelligence, so a system that is better than humans at everything we do. And this is a survey that was, results of a survey in which top AI researchers were asked when they think we'll attain human-level intelligence. And these are different groups, but the long story short, it's 50 years or less. So this is the time frame that we're thinking about. It will happen in our lifetimes. So one of the most influential scientists in the field, Nick Bostrom, asks probably the most important question the humanity will ever ask. What if we succeed? Think about it. Narrow AIs are those narrow applications to specific problems. Then there's the general AI, where artificial intelligence that is smarter than us at everything we can do. But there's no reason to think it will stop there. These systems, by definition, can improve on itself. And the smarter they get, the better they get at improving themselves. So we already see that AIs are replacing radiologists and financial traders. And there already are autonomous organizations running on blockchain. And there's no reason to believe AIs will not replace the CEOs of the company. So at some point in the next 50 years, maybe less, we might see ourselves in a system that's autonomous. And I call that moment autonomous capitalism. This is when the majority of economic activity is no longer controlled by humans. It's when the digital corporations are sort of making decisions by themselves, the corporations that we initially seeded. And now it's a very important question. How do we make sure those corporations, those actors make good decisions for us? How do we align them with our values? How do we communicate the complexities of our world to them? How do we explain that we dislike pain, but we like to cry in the movies sometimes? And how do we tell them that we like private property, but we like our oceans and our skies to be shared? How do we make sure when given ultimate power, they don't just go about their way and just optimize for that silly digit by the dollar sign at all cost? So there's a happy scenario. I think if we think about it, and there are people in the artificial intelligence safety research who are thinking about it right now, that are trying to design systems that are very aligned with what the humans want. And I think we will need very powerful frameworks to do that and for that to be successful. And this is where it binds very well with the field of impact investment. As I was reading some AI safety papers, I realized that that field is asking exactly the same questions as the field of impact investment. These are questions about governance, measurement framework, alignment, and reducing negative externalities. I challenge you to try to look into some of those papers and see how they can impact your thinking about the future of your work. And I think also what's more important is that the important work everyone in this room is doing could already be helpful to the field of artificial intelligence safety research. Thank you.
I guess, Silicon Valley, I kind of associate with a mindset that all will be for the best in all possible worlds, right? We solve these problems, and everyone benefits. Kind of as a culture, how well and how should it ought to think about some of the bad outcomes that you've talked about? So OpenAI might be one example, but sort of where do you look for people to think about those negative outcomes?
So there are. I would actually say it's refreshing to see that in this particular field, or I guess subdomain in Silicon Valley, people are not as optimistic. So Nick Bostrom, who I quoted, he published this great book, Superintelligence, and this is a plug for this book. You should read it. It's amazing. And then everyone got very afraid of what could be the consequences. It's Elon Musk and a bunch of other tech leaders read the book, and that's when they started funding the AI safety research. So I think it's just as measuring impact of investing on a business activity. I would say this will happen on an even larger scale. I think the default right now is that it's not necessarily a happy scenario. So that's where I guess, but I think it's great because a lot of people in Silicon Valley are trying to work on it, and that's what I'm trying to motivate everyone in this field to try to think how your work could already power that. So it sounds like sci-fi, but it's very real and it's very urgent. So I guess that gives it importance.